it's Tony. I'm back. A very special episode today, but every episode is special because I have the coolest people on my podcast. So let me tell you what Women In is. It's a podcast that celebrates women in all walks of life and the people in their lives who are lifting them up. You're going to hear from super cool people in my life and share their stories to inspire others to support all the extraordinary women around them. This is a space to be disruptive, forward-thinking, and change agents for humankind. It is uncensored, fun, and curiosity-driven. I often get asked why I do what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and the reason why is that I'm passionate about breaking down barriers for my kids' generation. It's equal parts about my guests and the places we came to each other's lives, whether it be the Kalamazoo Wings, Mindfulness Elevated, Tony Will Coaching, or you happen to be in my family and friends circle. And our guest today, this is really cool, and you're going to hear how Todd Kinney came into my life, but let me tell you about Todd first. Todd is an attorney who lives in Omaha, Nebraska with his wife and 4 kids and their 3 wiener dogs. In his free time, he enjoys traveling, golf, hanging out with his family when they let him, reading and spending an unhealthy amount of time and money supporting the Iowa Hawkeyes. Ooh, I got to tell you something about that in a minute, Todd. He was a classic gray area drinker who quit drinking in 2019. And considers it the best thing he's done for himself and his family. What's not in his bio, but I'm going to say right now, is he wrote this awesome book. I didn't believe it either. One Dad's to Discovery That Everything is Better Without Alcohol. So we're going to talk about this for a lot of different reasons. But before we do that, we need to say a little less from me and a little more from you. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
So let me tell you about the Iowa Hawkeyes real quick, because I'm going to forget.
Yes.
So my husband, and you might think differently by the time we finish this part of the conversation. My husband is from Delphus, Ohio. So he is a big Buckeye guy. And he said to me, we've been together 6 years now, and he says, Tony, I've always wanted to take you to the Ohio State. And because I'm neutral, I could give a shit. And he's like, I'm like, okay, so for years we've been talking about this. So he finds some tickets. We're going October 5th. And guess who we're playing?
When they play Iowa.
You know it.
Yes.
You know it. So I'm going to be there.
Are you? Oh, I'm jealous. Well, unfortunately, you're probably going to see an Ohio State win.
That's what Josh said.
In Columbus. We don't fare very well in Columbus, but I hope you enjoy yourself, and I hope the Hawks put up a good fight.
Yes, and I was like, this is cool, because I know after reading your book that you're a big Hawkeye guy.
Yes.
And what I would dare say, and I work in pro sports, so I'm used to being around fanatics. You're pretty much a fanatic, is what I would say.
I am, yes, for better or for worse. I am. I'm better at handling it than I used to be, believe it or not. But it does occupy a lot of my time and energy, especially around this time of year.
It's interesting. See, totally off script already. We haven't even gotten to how we met. But because I'm often fascinated by what I see in pro sports with some of our season ticket holders. And I'm like, wow. I get it.
Yeah, no, it's hard to explain to people. And my wife is kind of like, she gets it more now than she used to when we first met, but she still doesn't fully get it. She doesn't understand how, like, on a Sunday, I'll wake up and the first thing I will think about is something that went wrong. And why did that play happen the way it did? And then I will stew over it for the next 48 hours and try to stop myself from stewing over it for the next 48 hours.
Yeah, because it's outside of your control.
It is. Yeah, I used to be much worse about letting a loss ruin my weekend or the next couple days. And then I would get mad at myself for letting it ruin my weekend or the next couple days. And that would just make it worse. And honestly, it does not ruin my weekend like it used to. So I feel like I'm making some progress there.
That's good, because I am on the receiving end of a lot of the, as the GM of the team of the Kalamazoo Wings. I mean, people will light me up on social media, and it doesn't bother me because I know that they're fanatics, but my husband has a hard time with it because they're like, Tony Will's a clown, fire Tony Will. And then they go into my gender and all. I mean, it's just stupid, but he's like, this has to bother you. I'm like, no.
Well, good for you. And if you know, I always imagine those people, if you're walking down the street and it's kind of the weird person on the street corner talking to himself, that's sometimes who's on the other side of those, you know, comments. But one thing I have done that has helped me like not stew over things is if Iowa loses, I don't go anywhere near social media for at least a day, usually 2 days. I don't read about it. It just makes things worse. It just lets you ruminate in your anger and bitterness. Yeah. And it's not good.
Yeah. Well, that's a good tip for those fanatics that are listening.
Yes. Just take a break, go for a walk.
And
that helps.
Realize that it's not the GM, depending on the sport, it's not the GM's fault. It's not like, just, I don't know. But it's interesting because I often say, God, I would love to go to their jobs and stand over their shoulder and say, you should be fired every time it doesn't go their way. But I know that's part of the gig. So, you know.
It's a blessing and a curse, probably.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So the first question I asked, but I didn't ask it. So you're the first time I haven't asked the first question first because we got off on this amazing sports conversation. But how did we meet?
We met at Sober in the City in Tampa, Florida. What was that, February of this year?
Yeah.
It was the first time I had been to a Sober in the City event. I don't know about you. But it was, I came away from that event thinking, man, it was really cool to have so many conversations with people who had all decided for whatever reason to give up drinking. And I was struck by how many just kind of meaningful conversations and interactions and engagements I had with people over the weekend. And it was really cool. And our conversation was one of those. And I knew about you going into that weekend because I was curious about the fact that you were GM of a minor league hockey team, being a sports enthusiast.
Yeah.
I love talking about the business side of sports. So it was very nice to meet you, and we had a great conversation.
And by the way, well, there's two things I want to point out. Number one, we had our first conversation at a bar.
That's right. We did.
At a bar. Two non-drinkers. I came up to get a coffee, and I think you were eating lunch.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, and then this is the second point. You stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yes, I did.
Because, and I get that, and I probably said this to you. I don't remember if I did, but I probably did, which is in my day-to-day life, I stick out like a sore thumb. So I know what it feels like because I am a vast minority being a woman in my role. And then you were amongst a sea of women, which sounds like a guy's dream, but it's not like that.
No, it's not. You're very self-aware of that. You're very self-conscious of the fact that you are one of the only males in the room. And I'm a white male, obviously. I haven't had a lot of occasions where I feel like that. But yes, I did that weekend, and it was interesting. But everybody was so welcoming, and it was such a supportive, good group of people. That helped a lot. But yeah, you definitely noticed it. And I know there's people that feel that every single day, like you probably do when you walk into work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to point that out because it can be really uncomfortable for some people. And just to say, hey, I see you. I know that you're a minority here, and, and which you point out something so appropriate. You're a white dude and you're a minority. Like that doesn't happen often.
No.
But I was like, I already had your book. I already had it at that point. And I showed you because I think I said I'm in the middle of reading this right now at the time. And the reason I bought your book, someone said something about on social media, and I was like, it's about fucking time a guy writes a book like Quit Lit, because it's so saturated by middle-aged white women like me. and I'm not even an author yet, one day. And I was just like, I need this because I coach both male and female clients. And my male clients, like, there's some books I recommend, but it doesn't resonate unless it's penned from a guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was really exciting for me when you wrote this, and I read it, and I do recommend it to some of my male clients, especially because we'll talk about what you do for a living. Well, I read it in your bio, but I was just so inspired by that. So let me ask you, again, I'm completely off script, which is surprising. What made you decide to write the book? And when you go to these events and you see like women are more apt to talk about their relationship with alcohol than men. So where's the courage for you to not only write the book but show up and be in the room and talk about it?
So there were two main reasons that kind of led me to write the book. One was I read a lot when I decided to stop drinking, and then the first few months when I quit. I didn't even know, when I stopped drinking, I didn't even know that there was a genre of books called Quit Lit. I didn't know what that was. I'd never heard of it. And then all of a sudden, once I discovered it, I just started devouring whatever I could get my hands on. And I read a lot, and that helped me tremendously to read other people's stories. I felt like when I decided to quit, I felt like I was on an island. Felt like I was the only, this sounds so silly now, knowing what I know, but at the time, I mean, I literally felt like I was the only person in the world who struggled with alcohol the way that I did. And that nobody else out there had the same issues. Nobody understood. It was just me dealing with this by myself. And then you start reading other people's stories, and that is so helpful. And once you start to realize you're not the only one, there are hundreds and thousands of people out there who are struggling with the exact same issues. So that kind of planted a seed in me. Like, I mean, I just think that's what makes the world go round. When someone helps you, when someone does something, whether it's write a book or tell their story or what it can be anything, and helps you get through something that you're struggling with or you think you're alone in, I think it's natural to kind of want to turn around and do that for someone else. I think we kind of have an obligation to do that as human beings. So there was that. And then once I got to like my year anniversary of quitting drinking, I was feeling like really, I just felt a strong pull to help people. I wanted to help people in the same way that others had helped me, because I benefited so much from that, and I was so grateful for it. And I was so blown away, was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed a life without alcohol. I wanted to tell anyone who would listen about it. But more than anything, I wanted to say to people, look, I get it. I've been there. You're not alone. You could do this. And once you get through that, kind of tough part, you're going to love what you find on the other side. And so I didn't really know what the book was going to look like. I honestly, I didn't give hardly any thought to the fact that I was a male writing it. I mean, I do now. And I remember looking, you get on social media and you look for sober accounts and all that stuff. And it's a lot of female accounts. And I kept thinking, I must be not looking in the right place because I'm missing all the males in this space. But yeah, you're right. There aren't many. Mm-mm. And so I didn't really think of it in terms of I'm a guy telling my story. But, in hindsight, I'm glad I did it for that reason, because hopefully it will help other guys who might be looking for, a story from a similar person that they identify with.
Yeah. Well, and there, as we know, I have experience in my trying to stop drinking days of being in AA and trying that, and there are a lot of men there. There's just as many men that struggle with this as women. It's just there's stigmas, right? Like women face certain stigmas in different ways in our lives, but men face stigmas too. Right. Yeah. And it's this idea, and you would have to describe it because I'm not a man, but like that, you got to be tough enough, and, your ego or your pride or, like all those things. And I'm sure, and I know that you talked about that in the book a little bit too, like the process of like making this decision and the painful journey to get to the other side. And so what would you say some of those feelings were back then, like that are stigmas for men related to this topic?
I legitimately felt like I was losing my identity as a male. Like I was handing it over. I was leaving it on the side of the road. Like, what kind of guy are you if you don't drink? I mean,
yes, that's what I'm talking about. That you hit the nail on the head. And how scary is that?
Yeah. That's not. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to give up their identity as a guy or a female. But yeah, it took me a while to get through kind of that phase of, well, it held me back for a long time. It's like, I for a long time thought of, I had a picture in my head of people. I didn't know very many people who didn't drink. Yep. But when I imagined it, I was like, well, if I imagine a guy who didn't drink, I thought, well, he's weird. He's not fun to hang out with. I'm not going to have anything in common with him. I don't really want to have a conversation with him. And, oh, by the way, he must have been like living under a bridge, drinking out of a bottle, homeless, because that's who quits. Those are the people who quit drinking.
Yep. And
yeah, it's. I never realized how closely tied to my identity as male drinking was.
100%.
But it was. I thought back on all the. I talk about this in the book, like all the things I like to do. It really wasn't the thing. It was the drinking that went along with them. And that's so, now that just makes my head explode. But it wasn't, it wasn't like a round of golf with buddies. It was a round of golf with buddies so you could drink.
Yes.
And it wasn't tailgating to have fun before the football game. It was tailgating so you could get drunk before the football game. And like everything else was secondary. Yes, it was fun to hang out with your buddies and it was fun to do those things. But really, the main star of the show was drinking, and which is so backward. But that's how I thought of it. And so, nobody wants to do anything where they feel like they're giving up their identity. But I really didn't know what kind of guy I could be without alcohol in my life. And the crazy thing about it is, what I've discovered is you take alcohol away and you really discover kind of who you are. And I love this person much. I love this. Now I'm talking about how much I love myself.
Me too. I love me too.
I love the non-drinking version of me so much better than I did the drinking version.
100%. That's how I feel. I'm like, but it took such a long time to get over that.
Yeah.
Because that process of changing identities, because it's not only like you're changing it for you, but it's all these people around you that know you or knew me. My nickname was Tony Party Time. And, heaven forbid, that my friends gave me that name. But heaven forbid I decide that I don't want to do that anymore, right? Because now I have to explain, because even in my head, I thought I was that weirdo, not cool, boring, under the bridge. But I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not. But it's so hard to untangle that in our heads.
Yeah, it is. And I had the same persona kind of built up. Like I'm the person that someone can call on a 3:00 on a Tuesday who needs to go talk about something and have a drink. And I'll go have a drink with them. Like I want to be that person. I want to be someone my friends think of as up for anything, always willing to have a good time. And that's great in theory, but let's be honest, it wasn't the vision that I was getting hung up on did not always match up with reality.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to talk about, the name of the podcast is Women In, and when I emailed you and said I want you on my podcast, you're like, okay. What are we talking about? And I'm like, trust me, I've men and women on here. But because we coexist with each other, right? Like I often joke, and I was telling Todd off air, I'm prepping for my TED Talk, which is in a couple months, and I'm talking about women. That's the one idea, and then I'm going to branch off. But just so everyone gets to hear my opening line is going to be something around. Before I alienate half of the audience here, I want to make it very clear that I love men. In fact, I've loved so many, I've been married to 3 of them. So how's that for an opening line?
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
So my point is, like, we coexist together, right? Men and women. You came from a woman. You're married to some. I haven't met your wife, but I'm sure she's lovely. You have daughters. So talk to me about the women in your life, and specifically, I know your wife is on the list. But thinking about too, like the different versions of Todd, the different identities, because she's been around for both, and I'm sure there's some others, obviously. So talk to me about the women in your life who have helped shape you to be the Todd you are today.
Yeah, so obviously my mom was the first woman in my life, and I've been unbelievably blessed with the most wonderful mom and dad that anyone could ever ask for. But my mom, I know a lot of people say this and a lot of people think it, but in my head, my mom is like the quintessential mom. She just, she taught me what unconditional love is. Mm-hmm. She's one of the most compassionate human beings you'll ever meet. You hardly ever hear her say anything bad about anyone. She's always looking at the bright side of things and of people, and she was everything a mom you could ask for in a mom. She still is. She's not passed away.
Well, good. I'm glad. What's your mom's name?
Her name is Rondi.
Hi, Rondi. I'm sure she's going to listen to this. I'm glad that you're above ground.
Still with us, yes. But she taught me. I think growing up, she taught me respect for women. I grew up I was born in 1975. So I mean, we're not that far removed from the Equal Rights Act and women getting the right to. I mean, it's shocking how recent all that stuff was. Mm-hmm. So, the 70s and 80s, I'm sure if you went back in time today and listened to chatter on the street and just comments in offices, you would be blown away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that was never, I don't know. I don't remember any of that sort of thing in our house. In fact, there's a funny story. My dad is an attorney also, almost retired, but worked for the same firm for 40 some years. And when he went to, I think it was his first interview with the firm, the then managing partner of the firm, who at that time was like probably 70-ish years old. But he met my mom, and she had pants on. And the then managing partner of the firm, at some point later, pulled my dad aside and asked him if he was sure he wanted to marry a woman who would wear pants.
This is why. And, and you're absolutely right, because when we look back and as I prep for my talk, this is part of it. We are not far removed from that era, like a woman wearing pants, because that gentleman, not his fault, but he was in his 70s at that time. So he was whatever the greatest generation, whatever the generation before the greatest generation is. Right. And that was the thing. Like in the 50s, you didn't see women, like in his heyday, like probably when he was in his 40s, you didn't see women wearing pants. And if you did, it was like they were some sort of ball buster or closeted lesbian or something, but no, I mean, we're not far removed, and we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. So it sounds like Rondi was progressive. I love it.
She was. And I've always been, yes, it is. And I've always been drawn to confident, strong, intelligent, outspoken women, as long as I can remember. And I know that came from growing up around my mom. And she's not outspoken, like in your face outspoken, but I admire the heck out of her, and how she managed our family. And she worked for a while when we were kids. It's funny as I get on in this like sobriety thing. I've been sober now for almost 5 years.
I know you're coming up on 5, right?
I am, yes. And it's funny, a lot of the aha moments and the realizations I've had and the improvements that I feel like I've made remind me a lot of how my mom is. she's just a very calm, compassionate person that makes you kind of want to do life like she does.
Yeah.
So she was the first one, and I give her a lot of credit for kind of giving me that foundation that I took out into the world with. And in fact, I when I gave them a copy of my book, my mom and dad, when it was done, I wrote something on the inside, and one of the things I wrote was, something pulled me to quitting drinking. Something inside me was first whispering, and then talking a little louder, and then finally screaming, like, you need to do this. This is the right thing. And it's ended up being like the best thing I've ever done for myself. But I credit my mom and my dad for what planting that thing in me that pulled me towards that decision. It took a little while.
Yeah.
But
we're stubborn.
It took a little while, but I did get there, and I give them a lot of credit for planting whatever inside me kind of pulled me there. So,
yeah. Oh, it's beautiful.
So she was the first, and the next big presence in my life is my wife, who I met in law school. Oh my gosh, 25 years ago. No, 26 years ago.
Wow.
And Beth is very outspoken, and one of the first things that attracted me to her was how outspoken she was, and how confident she was, and how strong she was. She was one of those persons that doesn't. I remember when we first met, and we would get in discussions, and I'd say something like, well, it's always been like that. And she was one of the first to point out to me that that's not a reason to keep doing something. That's not a suitable reason. Like, maybe sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's not. Mm-hmm. And I just was attracted to her intellect. She's much smarter than I am. She did much better in law school than I did. So I tried to latch onto her coattails, because she figured out law school faster than I did. But she's worked we actually work in the same firm. It's a big firm, so we don't see each other. I want people to know we don't like having an office next door to each other.
Yeah, you have your separate lawyering spaces.
Yeah, we do completely different stuff. I don't know very much about what she does. She doesn't know very much about what I do. But I'm really proud of how she's navigated. She's one of the few female partners in our law firm, and our law firm, for law firms, does pretty good with females, but it's still, this industry is not an easy. I mean, I hope it's getting easier, but it's still not an easy place for women. It's not an easy place for women who want to have a family. Oh. And she's had and raised 4 kids throughout this whole journey, and it hasn't stopped her or slowed her down much. And she's in my opinion a success story for females that want to try to navigate the big law firm life and still have a family too. It's not easy.
No.
But she makes it look easy.
Yeah, good for her. That is. I'm glad you pointed that out, because it is. The Olympics just wrapped up, right? And there's been more focus and intentionality around the female athletes that I think one was pregnant, but that have had children or were breastfeeding, and there were places for them to breastfeed. Like, you can be an Olympian and a mom, right?
Yeah.
You can be a lawyer and a mom. Like, we don't, and it was this idea that it was expected that we, stay home and raise children. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I tried that for like a year, and I'm like, fuck this. Like, I love my son. Landon is almost 21, and I love him. But I'm like, the minute that kid could like have any type of a personality, I was like, peace. I'm out. I'm going to work. And so but it's hard because, and I'm sure if I were to ask Beth this question, and I'm sure you guys had talked about this, but I kept telling myself over the years, I'm a role model. They're watching me. and that's important to me.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but my governing belief with drinking, I'm going to pull this all. I always say all roads lead back to alcohol. My governing belief with drinking was I wanted to have it all. Right?
Yep.
Like the
Yep.
career, the white picket fence, husband 1, 2, or 3, whatever, like all this stuff, the kids, and alcohol. And the thing is, you can have it all, but just not at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
And so and also by removing alcohol, that's really when you have it all, like by actually
Yeah.
taking stuff away. So
Yeah.
I imagine that wasn't easy for her, and I know you still have some at home, as we were talking about before we started recording. But kudos to you for lifting up a woman and being supportive of a woman. This is exactly why I wanted you on this podcast, because it's not easy. Like what
No.
she's doing is not easy, and you guys had to really be a team.
Yeah, yes, you have to do it as a team, and I say that, and I know women still take on a disproportionate amount of the stuff. I mean, if you opened up our brains at any given point during the day, my wife is going to have like 4 times the amount of activity going on.
Yeah.
With work and home and the kids and all of that stuff. Women just take on more of that burden, even when you try to make it as 50-50 as possible, and you try to do it as a team. It's hard on it. It is harder. It's much harder for Beth as a woman to do what she's done at our law firm than it is for me to do what I've done at my law firm. Yeah. It just is, and I hope that's changing, and I hope that gap is closing. But it's still there. It's still there, and I hope that as a husband of a woman who's kind of worked her way up through the ranks there, that I have a little bit different perspective when young female associates are starting out, and I hope that I'm thinking about things differently than maybe some others are, because that's how things change. They change like that, and they change when you get enough women in the ranks to leadership positions with different perspectives that do things a little differently. That's how they change too. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're willing to speak up. And
yes.
And that's what's interesting. That's how this podcast was born, because there are some other women that I'm around, but they don't want to speak up, and that's okay. They don't have to, but I will, because that's how change. Because I want less hurdles for my kids' generation, our kids' generation, because your kids are in the same Gen Z as mine. And I'm hoping that there's less barriers. Not that they're necessarily going to work in sports, but whatever they're doing, right? Maybe they're going to be lawyers, or who knows? I mean, it's still a roll of the dice right now. So,
well, I think of when I think of women's sports and how that's taken off in the last 4 or 5 years, and I look at me and my daughter, and then my sons. I just look at how. Caitlin Clark. See, all roads lead back to alcohol for you. All roads lead back to Iowa Hawkeyes for me. But we had the Caitlin Clark, phenomenon when she was at Iowa, and it's still going. But I've watched the whole phenomenon of watching women's sports, of cheering for women's sports, and having women's sports be appointment viewing, just like men's sports have always been. That is completely different. That is a whole new thing that I hope that my boys don't even think twice about. That wasn't even on the radar when I was growing up. Like, you want to watch a women's basketball game? Like, you couldn't even find one, even if you wanted to.
Right.
And the last 2 years, we've watched or gone to as many, if not more, women's basketball games than we have men's. And I don't think my boys, I know my daughter doesn't think anything of it. I don't think my boys do either, which is great. And so, hopefully things around all of that are changing in that direction too.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the shift, and certainly, as you know, and because we've talked about, I work in this world, but it's different for me because I'm on the men's professional hockey side.
Yeah.
But I keep my eye on all the trends, and when you see sponsorship dollars starting to go, like bigger dollars be poured into women's professional sports, we're on the right track.
Yeah.
And because it's all about eyeballs and impressions and, all that stuff. So, and I get it. Like if I'm Nike, I'm going to want to, put my dollars where the eyeballs are on TV. But I mean, it's all like what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are seeing that, and the rumblings in sports around negotiations for the CBA for the WNBA seem to be much stronger, and they're going to have a salary. It's not going to be the same as the men's, but it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
progress.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I love seeing that, and I love that our kids get to see that, and they'll be like, "What?" They're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is the stuff that I was fighting for." I'm just one person out there, along with the people that are surround me, right, or the people that surround Beth or your daughter, or all the. It's not just one person; it's a lot of us. So.
Yes.
And I think too, it's not. Sometimes we call it ignorance, but a lot of it's just education. It's just like you don't really open your eyes to it till someone speaks up.
Yeah, and it's education and it's exposure, which is sometimes the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of goes back to your chicken and the egg thing. Like, well, yeah, revenue. You're going to put the salaries are going to be consistent with what the TV ratings are. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe the TV ratings are what they are because they're not getting the prime spots. And I think if we've seen anything in the last few years, it's that if you give them those prime spots, you will get the eyeballs. I mean, it's happening. And so it's just exposure. And it's just sometimes you want to I wish you could hit a button and just fast forward. And you're like, why does it take so long for people to get there? But you're trying to move a very big ship with a lot of people and a lot of different viewpoints. I mean, I get it, but sometimes it does get frustrating where you're just like, can we just get there already?
Yeah, like
can we just get to where we know we should be and where we know we're gonna be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are there any other women that you want to mention so you don't get in trouble when they listen to this podcast? Because I've had people get in trouble.
I don't want to get in trouble. Yes, I have one more, and that's my daughter.
Okay.
Scarlett. She is 12. We have 3 boys, and then she's the youngest in our family. So when Beth got pregnant with our 4th, Beth actually was kind of hoping for a boy because she knew boys.
Yeah.
Like she knew how to handle boys. We didn't know anything about how to handle girls. And I was thrilled when I found out we were having a girl. But little did I know like what, why I was so thrilled. But it's been so interesting to me. Your relationship with your kids it's everyone's a little different. Mm-hmm. And it just depends on their personality and how you guys mesh. And I don't know about you, but I find myself, even from kid to kid, I go through kind of phases with each one where I feel like we're, really good. And then I feel there are other times where I feel like we're really far apart.
Yeah.
But man, there's something, there is something to that father-daughter dynamic and relationship that is just so special. And I mean, I love hanging out with all my kids. I don't want my other kids to see this and think that
they're like, thanks, Dad.
But I have so much fun hanging out with Scarlett. She has an unbelievable sense of humor. I love her sense of humor. And we just have a lot of fun together. And I just love watching her develop. And I don't want to diminish what boys go through because boys go through a lot that I think sometimes we don't see and we're not as tuned into. But man, girls are hit with messaging from the time they can hear messaging. Probably before that, they are just bombarded with so much messaging in our society, a lot of which is not helpful and not healthy. And they just have to, I feel like they have to deal with more of that shit than boys do. And I don't know if that will, I don't know how you change that. But they just have to deal with a lot more stuff. And I don't know, knock on wood. I mean, we're going to have some tumultuous times ahead of us, I'm sure. But I think Scarlett's got a good foundation in place to deal with that stuff. But it's hard. I have a soft spot, for girls who have to grow up and deal with the bullshit that boys don't have to.
Yeah. Well, and the beautiful thing is that you and I talked about this when we were together in Tampa, which is you're 5 years alcohol free. She was 7 when you stopped drinking. She's not even going to remember that version of you.
Yeah.
And you get to do, if it is tumultuous or, there's highs and lows in any, person's life, right? Regardless of you're 12 or you're 82, but that you're doing it alcohol free as a parent.
Yes, it is interesting to me that she's got the least amount of time around me as in my drinking days. My oldest was 14 when I quit, so he was old enough, and my second one was 13. They were old enough that they knew when I was drunk. They knew when adults were drinking. They got all that. She didn't. I just didn't have as much time as a drinker with her, and I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Because you get like what you talked about, like when you go to at Sober in the City, when you're there, what happens when you meet people, because we automatically know we have this thing in common where we choose not to drink. And it allows us that one, okay, we don't have to think about that. So we just get to be authentic and ourselves, and it allows us to bond quicker, faster, right? And the same thing can hold true in our relationships at home or not at a conference like that, because depending on the person, that's out of the way. So we just get to you get to be Todd, I get to be Tony, and there isn't this whole which I ran into yesterday. Someone I ran into in the community was like, "Man, you're doing a lot of great work," and I wasn't sure where he was going with it. This was at a Starbucks, and I said thank you, and because I wasn't sure if it was K-Wings or whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, I didn't know you had a problem with alcohol." And I was waiting for that moment of the shame to kind of bubble up, just because I kind of and it didn't. I was like, yeah, I decided I wasn't going to put that shit in my body anymore, and I actually started a business to help other people. And he was like, yeah, I see that. He goes, I think you're right. It is shit, and that's really awesome. And there is no shame, because you know what? I did have a problem with my drinking.
Yeah.
Right? Regardless if I only drank once a month and that was a problem for me, it's still something I didn't like. Now, was I drinking once a month? Fuck no. But, but my definition of a problem could be different than someone else's, which you had talked about being a gray area drinker, right? And some people don't know what that term means. So would you define what that means for people who have no clue what it means?
Yeah, so my drinking probably looked normal on the outside to a lot of people who didn't know me well. Even a lot of friends that I drank with on a regular basis probably would have called it normal. I didn't drink every night. I drank on the weekend. I did drink every weekend. And then, socially, if we were out at something during the week, I would drink then. But usually not a lot of heavy drinking during the week. It was mostly weekend drinking, vacations, social events, that sort of thing. But to your point, it was a problem for me. I would get too drunk more often than I wanted to. I was thinking about drinking all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I wasn't drinking, I was like, okay, it's Tuesday. I'm going to be able to drink on Thursday at that social event we're going to. Okay, I can make it till Thursday. And then my whole weekends were always planned around, the first thing I would do is look at our kids' sports schedule and see how early I had to be up on Friday or Saturday. And that would help determine when was my heavy drinking night going to be? Was it going to be Friday or was it going to be Saturday? And everything revolved around alcohol. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I could, more often than not, I couldn't control it to the extent I wanted to. I had countless mornings where I woke up and thought, why couldn't you keep yourself in check the night before? For the 162nd time, what is wrong with you? And all that takes its toll on you, and it really just chips away and chips away and chips away. And so I always tell people I had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and it got to the point where it was negatively impacting my life enough that I wanted to make a change. And so it wasn't drinking every day. It wasn't waking up and opening a bottle of vodka. It was what looked like normal, suburban dad drinking. But and that works for some people, but it was not working for me.
Exactly. And that's the difference. And that is where it gets tricky, because in that gray area, it can feel like, no, I'm especially if we're getting, and I got into this place where I was like, oh, when I saw someone drinking more than me, which was rare, but I was like, whoo, I still, like, oh, I'm okay.
Gravitate to them. Yes.
Yeah. I'm okay, 'cause they drink more than me. So that means I'm not that bad.
Oh yeah.
Right? And it's not about the other people, right? It's about how we feel about us. And like you said earlier about that internal thing your parents implanted in you by raising you the way that you did. It's a whisper, and then it eventually screaming at you, and it's like, ah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that gray area drinking is where most people fall. Like I say, anyone that drinks is on the spectrum. And not that means they have a problem, because they're only the ones that can determine that. But if you drink, you're on the spectrum.
Yeah. I remember the first time I kind of told my story on it, it was on a TLC meeting, which is a sobriety support group. And it was around my year anniversary. And so I was just going to tell my story, and I was nervous because I didn't think there was anything noteworthy about my story. I was like, I didn't end up in jail. I didn't like lose my family or lose my house. I didn't crash my car. Like, this is, I don't know, people. And I was explaining all this to the woman who was leading the meeting. And I was like, are people going to find this interesting? It doesn't seem that interesting to me. And she said, that is exactly why people will find it interesting. And she said, you have no idea how many people kind of view their drinking the same way. And I mean, I understand that now, but I didn't fully grasp it at the time.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. I think that's where a lot of people fall. And I thought people who are gray area drinkers don't quit drinking. Like, they're not the ones who quit drinking. The ones who do crash their car and end up in a jail cell or lose their kids for some reason. Those are the ones that end up quit drinking. The ones that get hauled off, involuntarily to a rehab center.
Yep.
And of course, it's, there's a whole other world of drinkers out there that sometimes end up quitting too.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. It literally is.
Yeah.
I love how you describe that. Tell me, because what this topic is, this broad topic, alcohol. You and I changed our minds about alcohol, right? And you're coming up on 5 years. I'm coming up on 4 years. What else recently have you changed your mind about?
Oh boy, so that was a really interesting question. When I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's something I think everyone should think about more." Mm-hmm. Is what have you changed your mind about? So I think I've changed my mind about whether or not grounding your kids is effective. Mm-hmm. I used to be a big proponent of grounding our kids. I was very because this is how I was brought up, mm-hmm. and I consider it mostly to have worked. But I was brought up, if you did X, there was going to be Y as a consequence. Mm-hmm. And the consequences were always pretty heavy in my adolescent opinion. And so I was very programmed to believe that if your kid makes a mistake, makes a bad decision, whatever, yes, have compassion for them, but there's got to be a consequence. And that consequence, more often than not, for us was always grounding. And my wife, a few years ago, started saying, I don't know if grounding is effective. I don't know if that prevents if it does what we need to be doing to decrease the chances of that happening in the future. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, that's great. Of course it works. But as I've thought about it more and more, and I've read about it more, I don't know if it does. I don't know if, and I'll give you an example. One of our kids got in trouble at school. I'll just say it was an issue of honesty. and not a major one, but not a minor one either. So somewhere in the middle. And instead of grounding him, I found this documentary for him to watch, and he had to watch it and basically write an essay on it. And then we talked about it. And it was a documentary on, all these people who, it was like Bernie Madoff and the people who got in trouble with that college admissions scandal.
Oh yeah.
And a bunch of other people who kind of made the news for getting in trouble. And the kind of point of the documentary was all these things that ended up being really big, newsworthy, kind of blow up things. All of them started with a really small, innocuous form of deception. Like something that none of these people ever thought would come to anything, let alone lead to what it eventually led to down the road. And so I don't know if that worked with my kid. But it did seem like it might be more effective than just like grounding him for a week or two.
I love it. I think it's brilliant. It is, because I too fall into that category. And I'm in a blended family, and so my husband and I often joke that if we had kids together, it would have never worked, because our parenting styles are very different, and I lean towards different styles of reinforcing what they're not supposed to be doing, because we can't control these kids, but their brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. So it's like, okay, how do we do this? And I'm not saying I have all the right answers, but I like this anti-grounding, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, education, learning. Yeah. Right? Yeah. There's a plenty of stuff out there to consume where there's just a plethora of tools. And I also like what you're talking about, which is reading on it, because I read a ton, and that's one of my questions. Beyond reading your book, which you autographed my book, so thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
It's worth a lot of money then.
It's no one's getting their mitts on this one. But what are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh, I actually am in the middle of a book called High Achiever. It's a memoir by a woman who, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name, and I don't have her book in front of me. I hate mentioning a book and not the author's name.
I can Google it while you talk.
High Achiever is the name.
Tiffany Jenkins.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say Stevens. I wasn't even close. Tiffany Jenkins. So I just told my wife last night, I'm like, there need to be more books on prison, because the first couple chapters of this, it's a memoir, are about her getting thrown in jail. And the stories from her getting thrown in jail are crazy. She was a drug addict, was dating a cop, stole a bunch of his guns, sold them to a drug dealer for drugs, and then got busted for that, got thrown in jail. And then she kind of she gets sober, and now I think leads a very productive life.
Now I can't wait to read it, because
it's really good.
Okay.
So I'm only about a little over halfway through it, but
it's on the list, because the book I'm reading right now was recommended. I think you listened to this podcast. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But I interviewed our head coach, Joel Martin, and
I did listen to that one.
Joel read Open, which is Andre Agassi's memoir that was back in 2009. And oh my God, I've got like 40 pages left. So good. So I'm getting many great book recommendations for my podcast guests, because I read my age every year. I don't know if you know that, but I read my age every year.
Yes, I remember that. That floors me, because I'm getting better, but I mean, if I read 2 books a month, that's a good clip for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, I was 46. I'm just a few years younger than you, but like this week I'm on book, and I have what I call a battle board. I coach my clients on setting up battle board. It's like a whole thing. And I'm on book 34 this week. So I'm getting there, Todd. I'm getting there.
I am impressed. That's gonna be one of my goals to get up to that level.
Yeah,
I buy so many books that after I finished the last one, I just went to my bedside table and looked at the stack, and there were like 3 that I had bought and had not read, including High Achiever, and that's how I started reading this one. So I buy books all the time.
Half I buy, half I actually have hard copies, and half I listen to because I turn my car into a rolling university. So rarely do I listen to the radio unless I need a moment. But and I listen to my age too. By that I mean podcasts. So
you do?
Not my own. That doesn't count. But because that would be really douchey. But
well, you could and not. You could count it and not tell anyone that that's part of the count.
No way, Jose. No way. So, but yeah. So I listen to my age and read my age because I want to be a deep well, not only for me, but like my kids, right, or my clients or whoever. So if I need to whip out a good grounding, I can have them listen to a 2-hour podcast.
That's right. Well, I don't know if you found this to be true, but I found that giving up drinking kind of opened my mind to so many, because what drinking is for most of us, for most of our lives, the idea of giving up drinking, it seems impossible. Mm-hmm. It's like, why don't you go make the Olympic team and in the 100-meter tomorrow?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, that's how I thought of quitting drinking. Like, will never happen. Don't want it to happen. And then when you do something that you once thought was impossible, it totally, I mean, it's a really powerful kind of unlocking of your mind. For me, it opened my mind to, it made me think of like, all right, what else is out there that I have been totally wrong about all these years that I need to go explore?
Yeah, you changed your mind.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but it's not. It's
no, it's not.
And it's subtle. It's so subtle. So, all right. We could keep talking forever, but
yes,
this is fun. Where can people find you if they want to buy your book or they just want to find out what you're up to, or maybe they want to come listen to you speak at Sober in the City in Seattle?
Yes. So the book is on Amazon. It's also on my website. That's toddkinney.com. I'm on Instagram at tkinney111. That's about it.
Okay. And I always know where to find my guests because I found them to be on here. So if you're like, where do I find Todd? I can help you too.
Yes.
So thanks for coming on and just talking about all the things in your life and all the wonderful women in your life and just your life and all the great things you've done in this space that we met. It's such a gift, right? That we chose to stop drinking. That's how we came into each other's lives.
I cannot count the number of connections I've made that I'm so grateful for since I stopped drinking and because I stopped drinking. And I put you in that category. And you're right. It's a gift.
It is.
So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone wants to find me, I'm not hard to find. kwings.com, mindfulnesselevated.com, Tony Will Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn under Tony Lentini Will. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram at I'm Tony Will. So until next time, I will see y'all soon.